Our understanding of the importance of framing the benevolent intent, or if you like, the purpose of an organization, is rooted in our understanding of empowerment. We've put forward previously, if you want to empower somebody, you need to first of all give the person the means to do what's required of them. You need to then make the person able to do what's required of them. You've got to teach them how and why, and then you've got to hold the person accountable. And this model is informed by our understanding of this rule of thumb that says don't give a person a fish, empower them to fish or teach them how to fish. So if you really wanted to empower somebody to fish, you'd give them all the things that they might need to fish. You'd give them a rod, a reel, some resources, a license to fish, etc. You teach the person how to be able to fish, and you teach them why they should fish. But at some point, the person now should go out and fish. I mean, if I gave the person all the means and the ability they could conceivably require to fish, and I then said to the person, if you don't catch a fish, I'll give you one from my freezer, the person still won't fish. So the last thing I've got to bring to the party is a spirit of accountability. I say to the person, if you don't catch a fish after this, starve. And what's very important is that there is a dividing line, which means these two variables of the means and ability are actually the precondition to be able to hold somebody accountable. And probably the critical piece in order to be able to hold somebody accountable is that they understand why the job should be done. You can't expect any sense of commitment to doing something if somebody doesn't understand why. So that invokes a question, of course, which is why companies exist. And what we have here is a range of reasons that were given by a group of people that I worked with recently to a slightly different question, and the question was, how do you measure the success of a company? But clearly, you also measure something against how you see its purpose or what you think it's there for. So this would kind of reflect how people saw the purpose of a company. And you can actually reduce this to 4 variables: to serve the interests of owners, to serve the interests of employees, to serve the interests of the community, and to serve the interests of customers and clients. The question is, is there a primary interest involved here? And I think there is a primary interest, and I think that our primary interest is that of customers and clients, because the question to ask is, does supply exist to serve demand, or does demand exist to serve supply? And clearly, supply exists for demand, sellers are there for buyers, and companies exist for customers. A very nice quote from Mr. Kellogg, the founder of Kellogg's, the cornflake company. He said, "The purpose of a business is not to make a profit." What a dreary and demeaning description. The purpose of a business is to add value to people's lives. And the consequence of doing that well is that you make a handsome profit. Now, this idea that businesses are there to serve, and principally there to serve customers and clients, is clearly at odds with the sort of the subtext, which says businesses are really there to make a profit or to serve the interests of owners. Now, the problem becomes of that view that businesses are there to serve owners. This view that businesses are basically there to serve and to serve customers and clients. That is kind of at odds, obviously, with how very often people see businesses, where the view is that businesses are there to basically make a profit or to serve owners. Now, if you see it from that point of view, let's say, for instance, we have the stock exchange, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and there's a CEO of a business, we'll call him Lord Creosote, and he thinks that he's there to serve the stock exchange. He's there to serve the shareholder. With a result, and clearly he doesn't get that result out of the sky. He gets that result from somebody reporting to him, who you could call a manager. So the direction of service is from the manager to the CEO, and that manager gets the result that she's serving the CEO with from a supervisor. So the direction of service there is up, and she gets her result from a worker. And basically, the effect of that is that if the organization is there to serve the shareholder, you fundamentally orientate the entire organization away from the customer, who is furious because she's being unloved. So our argument is that really, when an enterprise understands or is there to serve customers and clients, you have an inversion in the direction of service in the reporting relationships. The CEO is there to serve the manager, who's there to serve the supervisor, who's there to serve the worker, who's there to serve the customer, who's there therefore happy. And the point about this is that happy customers actually make profitable businesses. So this isn't hostile to the interests of the shareholders, precisely because the customer is happy that the shareholder, in fact, has a financial reward. So the financial success of the company is based on this inversion of the direction of service. This is also in line with our understanding that says that the success of any organization is really based on the degree to which the individuals make a contribution. Because one of the ways of describing the success of a business is that it produces a profit or a surplus. Let's assume that's true. So here we have three bakers who collaborate to bake a cake, and each one of them takes a slice home at the end of the month. And there's a slice left other than what they've taken home. And that slice we would then call a surplus. And in most enterprises, we would measure the success of the business on the basis of the size of that surplus. And the question is, why does that surplus exist? That surplus only exists because on an individual basis, each one of those bakers gave more than what they took. They produce a surplus and therefore succeed when the average person in the business gives more than what they take in pursuit of the group's objectives. Now, the question is, how does one solicit this intent to contribute among people? And we have a bit of a thought experiment that you could consider. Let's assume you work for a small pharmaceutical company that has found the miracle cure for AIDS. And let's say, how would you feel about the following two statements? First statement is, work very hard at making these drugs, because if you do, you'll make a shareholder on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange very rich. Second possibility, work very hard at making these drugs, because if you do, you'll help to save millions of lives all over the world. Now, which one of those two are going to make you feel committed? And clearly it's the second and not the first. That suggests the following: that, surpluses are made by groups of people who are populated by individuals who are giving more than what they're taking. And you cannot seek to solicit unconditional behavior if you don't give people a cause which is noble enough for them to suspend their self-interest. We call that noble cause a benevolent intent. What we mean by benevolent intent is that this is an understanding of the contribution you make to the world. And to give you an example of how benevolent intent gets formulated, so you establish our benevolent intent as an organization by considering the following: who are our customers and clients? In other words, who pays, who gets invoiced, and what are their needs and wants? What are they buying? What do they get invoiced for? What is the transformation we're trying to effect? What is the difference between the state before and after the product or service is delivered? And then finally, therefore, what is the benevolent intent of our company? Should the transformation that we refer to in this point 3 be affected consistently, how will the world become better? And I'd like to give you 4 examples of where we've done this before, and to give you an idea of just how powerful this idea of framing a benevolent intent could be. The first example is African explosives. This work was done quite some time ago in the mid-90s, but they identified their customers as mines and civil contractors. Obviously, African explosives produce explosives. What are the customers' needs and wants? Well, they need explosives and initiating systems. What's the transformation they're trying to effect? The breaking of rock. And therefore, what's the benevolent intent of African explosives? Unlocking the wealth of Africa. If you consistently help mines to break rock, you help them to unleash or unlock or make available minerals and metals, which basically unlocks the wealth of the continent. The second example I'd like to point out is PPC, Pretoria Portland Cement. Who are their customers? Anybody who needs cement. What are their needs and wants? Cement. That's pretty simple. But what's the transformation you're trying to effect? Well, cement helps you to bind aggregate. So the binding of aggregate is the transformation. And therefore, what is the benevolent intent of PPC? It is building the nation. Another example is Fair Price Furnishers. Who are their customers? Householders. What are their needs and wants? Furniture and appliances. What's the transformation they're trying to effect? To turn houses into homes. And if they effected that transformation on a consistent basis, they would help to build families and raise a nation. The final example I'd like to point out is is Telenor Pakistan. Their customers are basically any person in Pakistan. Their needs and wants are data and voice. What's the transformation they're trying to effect is connectivity. And therefore, what is their benevolent intent? Just to make things possible. Karo mumkin in Urdu. So the purpose of establishing the benevolent intent of the organization is to give the people in the business an understanding of the nobility of the work of the organization. It gives them a reason which is big enough, which helps them to transcend their immediate self-interest.